Why don't we begin?
We're sorry. 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 We're sorry.
Estoy presente ahora. Me amo. Estoy libre de mi ira. Estoy libre de mi tristeza. El amor es mi experiencia.
We're sorry. 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 We're sorry.
Estoy presente ahora. Me amo. Estoy libre de mi ira. Estoy libre de mi tristeza. El amor es mi experiencia.
Game over.
Why don't we begin?
I don't mind nothing.
I don't mind. I can put the chat on here. I think I could turn on the chat.
You can do whatever you want, bro. I believe in you. I believe in you. By the way, on my end, we're already live, so
Oh, we are live.
Mhm.
So professional.
well, you know how
Right.
it goes. We're super live
You
all
think
the
I'm not
time.
a professional?
Bro,
No countdowns, no nothing.
no countdowns, no nothing.
countdowns,
This
no
is how it
nothing.
happens. Are you live, Afonso? Are you
Yeah.
ready
Yes,
to
I
go?
am live.
Okay.
I
Can
am ready to go.
can
Cue
let
the
me
music, bro.
hang on.
Cue the music, bro. Hang on.
Talk a bit just so I can hear on the thing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think it's good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're good. Sorry, there's going to be a lot of echo for whoever's listening to things. I apologize. It's how it goes. It's the life.
Seems to be alright on my end.
Okay, seems to be all right on my end as
Um,
well. So yeah,
Let me just send this real quick.
cue the music. Boom, cats, 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 boom, cats.
Oh no, shit, copyrights.
Take on me. Anyway, hello everybody. How's everybody doing today? We're here for another
We are
live
good.
podcast with Papu91, Jack Reinhardt, and Dagon Caldrum. We're all here today. Say hello, boys.
Hello, boys.
Hey, hey.
Hey. And so today we're bringing you a special little podcast. We're going to discuss a little bit about Alfonso, you do your thing. You know better than I do what we're going to be doing. So,
Yes. I just realized. I mean, it's kind of all over the place, but I thought we could talk about it since we all put our fingers in those pies. It's been 20 freaking years of Xbox. 20. 20 years of Xbox. I mean, in my mind, Xbox is still
in
not
its
still, but
infancy,
it's the new console. Not its infancy. I mean, it's in its teens, right? It just Xbox graduated.
yeah.
Now it's into adulthood, and it's funny because it became a very, very big player super early, like in its days. It came out in 2001, 2 years into the Xbox 360, and it was between them and
In the
PlayStation
West,
competing for the main thing.
definitely.
Yeah.
And even
Absolutely.
so, there are some, but yeah, you go for it.
So,
No, I just wanted to say that that's like how
mhm.
it was
Sure.
fast. It's not like they took their time
Yeah.
evolving amongst several competitors. No, the first Xbox sold at a loss, but put the name out there, and then the 360 is so much cheaper than PlayStation, and that's when it really like spread.
Well, in all
Um,
in all fairness, my friend, the
over
first Xbox
there.
also released £100 or €100, I believe, cheaper than the PS2.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that was the big thing about the Xbox at the time. And that's why a lot of
yeah.
people, dwindled towards it instead of a PlayStation. Because it was like, well,
Was it like 1 year after or 2 years after the release of the PlayStation 2?
no, it was
The
it was
Months
Xbox?
the same
actually,
it was
about
at
a
the
year,
same time.
Same
What are
year?
you talking about?
same
It was
time.
at the same time.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 2000. Oh, yeah, true. 2001 and 2000. There was no
Yeah,
PS2
it
yet.
got
2001. Yeah.
literally the PlayStation was released a month later or so. The Xbox was released €100 cheaper. That's what happened, kind of. And a lot of people were like, "Holy shit! Why would I not get a Microsoft console for €100 cheaper?" It is a bet because it's something different. It's something new that hadn't been done before. But at the same time, it was
To buy
like
memory cards.
the thing is also like you could tell at the time already that the Xbox was going to be a fucking machine. At just the same way that the PlayStation 2 was considerably an upgrade from everything
They
else we
lost
saw.
money on it. It
They
was a
have
very good machine when they
one
produced
year
it.
difference,
Yeah.
apparently.
Really? I could have
Uh,
sworn that
Yeah.
it was
no,
released.
no,
Ah,
no. I had
okay.
that impression as well. Xbox was
The
November
PlayStation
15th of 2001, and the PlayStation was March
was
4th of
Christmas
2000.
2000.
Oh,
Hmm.
Oh, March in Japan, but not for Europe, or was it in the world? March of 2000.
I just see March 4th, 2000
wow. Look at us talking
on
about
Japan,
things we
yeah.
have no idea about.
Hmm.
But I did because I did remember stuff in the 2000s with PS2, but maybe it was advertising. But no, then turns out it was probably
Hmm.
I
yeah
just I
out
just
then.
remember seeing the PS2 for sale and seeing the Xbox for sale relatively around the same time and being like, why would I buy a PS2 when the Xbox is
When
much
you can
cheaper?
get yeah
That
exactly.
was for me that was the big thing about the Xbox literally. And also because you boys know me and I'm a very anti-Sony kind of person. I mean, so it was the logical choice.
Sony.
For me, it
Anti-Sony.
was
Yeah.
Final Fantasy X.
That's a good reason to get.
The only reason I got PlayStation 2 was Final Fantasy X.
Okay, I was just thinking, what there was no Final Fantasy X on
Mhm.
Xbox. Yeah,
And
No,
if you
no.
PlayStation
and if
2.
you remember, in Final Fantasy IX, you had the trailer for Final Fantasy X when you bought it in the first PlayStation. Am I correct?
Oh,
Am I correct? I'm pretty
I,
sure that it was
I
on
don't
it.
know. I didn't own those
I
games.
don't remember that, but
I'm pretty sure that when you got because I do have Final
maybe it
Fantasy
was a
7, 8,
special
and
copy.
9, maybe,
Okay.
but I have the three physical discs of
Hmm.
7, 8, and 9, and I
Hmm.
remember that on the ninth you already had not a demo, but you had a trailer for Final Fantasy X, which I don't know
It's
if at the
possible.
time it was considered maybe to come out on the first PlayStation, but it was already there. pretty much.
The development of both Final Fantasy 9 and 10 started at the same time
Well,
because
there you
they
go.
wanted to close the PlayStation 1 lineup with Final Fantasy 1 and start with Final Fantasy 10 right away with PlayStation 2.
Makes sense. By the way, hey Primo,
Okay.
what's up, Fabs? Welcome to the chat. We're just talking about 20 years of Xbox consoles, podcasting a bit. Feel free to do your
We
thing.
ended
By
up
the
talking
way,
about Sony.
oh, by the way, Exoslayer 7 just raised £140 for Veterans Day in the UK. Congrats to him. Really nice, well done, bro. I loved watching getting your hair
Well done.
bleached live. That was a fantastic thing. That was great. Seeing you go all pink and shit, loved it. Fucking great. Check out his videos, check out his things. He streams quite a bit of different things as well, so drop in
Yeah.
to see him. Back to what we were saying. So yeah, PlayStation 2, Xbox.
Did you own the first Xbox, Lolo?
I had a neighbor with the first Xbox, and I found it very interesting, but it never had specific games I found interesting at the time for what I enjoyed. Like, as I mentioned, the reason I got PS2 was Final Fantasy X.
Mm-hmm.
But later, it's changed a lot because another friend of mine lent to me the Xbox. I played Knights of the Old Republic 1, I played Morrowind, I played Fable, and I was like, holy damn, so many RPGs that are
You're
exclusive
telling me
to the
now,
Xbox.
like, oh, there weren't games that I liked on Xbox. I was like, what?
No,
Like
at
fucking
first.
Yeah, but appealed you. I
first.
see what you mean.
Yeah,
At
yeah,
first, yeah.
It was only
At first, when
after.
Xbox was also competing with Sega and Nintendo. You mean the first like couple of years where it was Halo, Midtown Madness, maybe a couple fighting games, like Dead or Alive 3, right? Those games, and not when it started flourishing, right? So did you?
Sure.
So did you end up finishing those games?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did an exchange with our friend Peter back in Brussels, Rouge, and I lent him my PS2. He lent me his Xbox, and I played for a couple of months Morrowind, Knights of the Old Republic 1, Fable.
When on Xbox, oof,
Yeah,
that would be very rough.
Fable
you
was
know?
one of the big reasons to get Xbox back in the day. Personally, I
I
think.
agree.
Like, it's still nowadays. Honestly, it's one of those games that maybe graphically it's not withstood the test of time, but it's a game that you can easily go back to. Like even the original Fable, comfortably.
I think it's fine, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's okay.
I played the original Fable maybe 3 years ago again, and it was still like absolutely fine.
Okay.
Like it withstood the test of time. It's a classic. I mean, for me, Fable 2 is the ultimate one.
Original,
but
yeah, Fable 2 was very much
the
a
best
polished
one in my
version of
opinion.
of the first.
it was like Fable 1 was revolutionary. Fable 2 really did its own thing to upgrade the franchise, and then Fable 3 was just misery. But let's not go with that. Like, honestly.
It had its strengths, but yeah.
I never played Fable 3, so I'm good.
Look, it's like there's
How could you?
there's good things
I don't need
about it,
to.
but
But you don't need to play it, right?
It didn't
If you play the
create
first two,
as much
not
as
a must.
positive impact, maybe.
Yeah.
No, because with the third one, I didn't play it because I saw that people were upset about it. That's why I was
really?
just thinking,
Okay.
oh, it doesn't. Yeah, because even at that time, I was a teenager when those games came out, right? So there's like certain amounts of hours of screen per week that I can get.
Oh
Let's
yeah,
just put it that way.
you boys were limited
Or
to
I
amounts of
was
gaming.
limited, but actually, Fable, I didn't look at it as an RPG. I looked at it as an adventure game that had consequences and customization. I wasn't much into RPGs because at the time, for me, RPG meant complicated game on a computer.
So what was your definition? Like, give me a game example of what an
No, the
RPG
way I
was.
approached like Fable at the time was this is just a more complicated version of a cool action adventure game. You know, I didn't look at it as an RPG. Even though it's absolutely an RPG, I'm not saying it's not. It's just
Sorry, I just realized I had muted the whole conversation for a second. Sorry, but it's fine. It was maybe
No
for two
worries.
minutes. Um, so just to reiterate for whoever's been watching, Afonso asked what was the game that first came with the Xbox that we first purchased, and I was saying for me it was Jet Set Radio Future. So for me, it created the staple of what was gonna be that new generation of gaming uh, for the foreseeable future for me personally, because it was something I had not at all expected when I bought the Xbox. Honestly, I bought it with the premise that it could read DVDs, and at the time, I only had VHSs. So for me, it was going to be a DVD machine and a console.
When those things actually were quite pricey as well
Yeah,
on their own. Yeah.
exactly. So apart from it being a DVD machine, which at the time was like, oh my god, DVDs, holy shit, they were starting to appear in all the fucking blockbusters everywhere and shit. It was like, yeah, as soon as I started playing that game, I was glued. I was like, yes, this is the future. This is what I want to play. I remember Jet Set Radio Future was my first game, and I think that, I mean, I don't remember the next games I had. I do remember that within the first year there was a lot of good releases and a lot of even exclusives back in the day that were very unique. Like I remember Ninja Gaiden was a massive thing when it came out for the Xbox. It was,
Yeah, that was 2004, I believe. Yeah,
yeah. I
it was
think
very, very, very good.
I think maybe in the first year, one, if not the first, the second year, another game that I thought was really unique and exclusive, and it really showcased what the graphical capabilities of the Xbox were, and I think it's an underrated game, is Blinks the Time Sweeper.
I was gonna ask you about Blinks.
For whoever doesn't know, Blinks is, it's basically a platforming game where you get to control time with your character, and it's a cat, and you basically have to clear out a lot of garbage. He's like, it's like Ghostbusters. It's a cat with a fucking vacuum cleaner. You rewind time, you pause time, you record time, you do a lot of things within platforming, and you have to clear out the space-time continuum from bugs and shit like that. Doesn't matter. But graphically speaking, at the time when I saw that, I was like, my God, this is the future. The future is here. It's amazing. Um, I think those were probably the most iconic things I remember from having the Xbox. And then of course there's a whole other bunch of things we're still going to talk about, but I do think that those were maybe the things that marked me the most as initial releases. I don't actually remember what other games, apart from, the classics that we played, but I don't remember which ones were my first games. I do remember Jet Set Radio Future, obviously. Blinks.
Alive on Xbox,
Say again.
which ran really, really well. Dead or Alive 3
Oh, fuck yeah,
on
Dead or Alive.
Xbox.
That was one. Ah, bro,
Ah,
that was great. Because Dead or Alive had the whole thing of Virtua Fighter, which is much more
yeah,
within that realm of Virtua Fighter than Tekken or other fighting games that you had
yeah,
on other
it's different.
systems. And for me, who played Virtua Fighter a lot back in the day of the Saturn and things like that, and arcades, it had much more of that feel than other fighting games did at the time.
Because Dead or Alive 2, you could get it for the PS2, but I don't think you could get it for the Xbox. I think Dead or Alive 3 was the
It
first
was
one to come
exclusive.
on Xbox.
It was definitely
It was
exclusive.
exclusive, yeah.
Definitely. But yeah.
So that was really good. It was a bit of a shame to lose Tekken because I was a big Tekken fan.
Dead or
And I
Alive 3
remember
was
when
exclusive to the Xbox.
It was at the time.
yeah,
It might have already
yeah,
switched in between, but at the time it was exclusive.
at the time it was, yeah.
I think volleyball was
Uh,
definitely exclusive
Yes,
for
100% volleyball was exclusive.
for the Xbox because
oh, you got it.
in Japan, apparently one of the strategies they decided to play with the Xbox is to get Japanese IPs, develop games that would be only appearing on the Xbox lineup, and apparently one of them was Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball.
Which is also
If I
one of my
remember the story
favorites.
correctly.
Bruh, if there's one thing that,
Very good volleyball
bruh,
game.
First, great volleyball game, no matter what people say. Second, dude, those guys developed individual boob motion. It's with that game that that concept was developed. You actually see individual boob motion. This might sound very pervy as fuck, but dude, that's a milestone in video games. Trust me. It's fucking insane. It's really insane.
Yeah. It's what's the name of that studio? Is it
Temco.
Ninja Theory, Team Ninja, Namco?
I think it's Namco, but I'm not sure.
Tecmo, sorry.
Tecmo, yes, that's it. Tecmo. That's the one. Tecmo. Absolutely.
My dyslexia strikes again.
All our dyslexia and our memories are too affected to remember these things. It's been 20 years. 20 fucking
has.
years, bro.
It has,
It's insane. But yeah. So, what about you, Papu? What are first games? Because you got it. How far off the release did you get it?
Was Halo a first release, or was that
Playing
later?
it. I don't know.
not sure.
Actually, I know. I just
let me
know that
check.
Halo.
But it became a flagship very quickly, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Halo
was
was
the first game that I played on Xbox. So I played Xbox starting in 2002 because friends had them and stuff, and
Yeah.
um,
The
but I
Halo was
only
within the first
owned
year.
one.
So
Yeah, I only owned one in 2004, so virtually 2 years after it came out. Yeah,
okay.
and it was that famous pack with the Midtown Madness 3 and the first Halo.
Right,
So that was the
right.
first
Classic.
two games that yeah. Actually, for the first Xbox, although I loved the Duke controller, which was phenomenal back when
it's
controllers
amazing.
were a bit,
It's amazing,
a
bro.
bit different. There was more variety. I actually bought the Xbox that came with the updated, smaller controller that was indeed more practical with button placement.
Sure.
Not as comfortable as the Duke, I think.
It
I
was
still
more
like the Duke
practical
a lot.
because of the white and the black button, basically.
Yes, the white and black buttons were a lot well positioned, and I really enjoyed the Xbox. I mean, at a time where the hardware made a difference because it ran better
Yeah.
than the PS2 for some games. Okay, not all games.
Sure.
Like for example, I always found that football games at a time where I did play football games, video games, right, ran much better and felt better on a PlayStation 2. I still thought that Gran Turismo at the time was a way better driving game on the PlayStation 2 than the driving games you can get on Xbox. At least a driving simulator, right? They had that nailed down for PlayStation.
Sure.
But on the first Xbox, I just enjoyed playing a new type of games because I had the PlayStation before that for about 4 years or something like that, or 5 years.
Yeah.
It was the first console, and I had PC as well. But shooters on console was something that towards late in the PlayStation game, yeah, PlayStation had a few like okay shooters for console, but that's what they were, a shooter for console. When you play a shooter, you play it on PC, you don't play it on a fucking console. Then, of course, Halo shows up and it just changed the whole game in that aspect, gameplay wise.
I mean,
In the first
yeah.
games that I had in that sense for shooters, what I really enjoyed is that first of all, you don't shoot with face buttons. Let's get that shit out the way. So number two is, because that was very common back then in shooting games, either shooting with the face button or what is today the R1 or the R1 button. And Xbox had actually triggers that feel like triggers and not buttons. And that was very satisfying to play with when you like shooters at the time. I know it's like stupid to say it now and you take it for granted. And I think it was only by the PS3 or 4 that the buttons, the R2, L2 became shaped like triggers. Before that, it was still just buttons. But on Xbox, it was a new playing experience.
Sure.
That we didn't have before on consoles.
I mean,
we had them on a computer, but we never had them on consoles.
You just
don't mention the Z. Are you gonna say the Z button?
Yeah,
Is that what you're gonna say?
I'm gonna
You're gonna
Zed
say
you,
the
bro.
Z button?
I'm gonna Zed you.
You're gonna bring
There's.
it.
I'm sorry. I mean, if you look at Perfect Dark and
It's not the
GoldenEye, which
same.
are my go-to FPSs, I mean, I know it's not the same, but that's kind of, it was the trigger button.
button.
It's
Yeah.
the only trigger button.
Well,
you
it
have,
was
pretty
good
much.
because of the shape, right? It was a button, not a trigger. But because of the shape of the N64 controller, it did feel like a trigger.
It felt like a
The
trigger,
Xbox,
100%.
really, the Xbox ones, I mean, same formula today for all those things, you know, they really like, you know,
Yeah, of course, bro. Obviously, it's
you
different.
know, this was a big deal, like at the time.
Yeah, but dude, I mean, look, hang on, hang on, hang on.
Papu just froze. Jack is destroying his home.
No,
Ah,
don't
no,
say,
Papu is back.
don't say such things. I'm not
It's
destroying
just the
anything.
internet is not very steady, but
Okay.
we're good. Don't worry.
I'm not destroying nothing. Nothing's being destroyed. Okay, so, I mean, dude, look, look at this.
Of course, you
This
went
is
to
a
get the
proper
thing.
this is a proper trigger button. It's pretty proper for
Button.
the time.
It's
Yeah,
a
I
button.
mean,
It's not a trigger.
It's a
It's a
button.
button.
it's pretty
That-
proper. I gotta
Yeah.
say.
Trigger-ish, but yeah.
It's the only trigger that existed prior to, you know,
It
that
gets props for
generation.
that. Yeah.
We'll get props for that. Absolutely. Yeah. So first games I had was that. So Halo and Midtown Madness, and then after
Yeah.
that, Sega Soccer Slam was the third game I ever had. I was gonna buy either that or like Red Faction Guerrilla 2 or something like that, or Red Faction 2 at the time I think it was called.
Uh-huh.
Sega Soccer Slam was the third game I ever owned, and that summer I played and replayed Halo and Sega Soccer Slam, just like back to back. Midtown Madness Few is a lot of fun as well. Finished that game
Midtown
too.
Madness is great, but
Yeah,
it's so arcadey. It's just for fun, really. It's
yeah, exactly. I think it's Halo, and Halo was approachable enough that I could play with my little sister on a co-op campaign.
You
So
got a point. It was
actually,
pretty
it's
approachable.
funny. Yeah, it was rather simple and cool to play with, and what I really like, I mean, about Halo at the time was that it wasn't just a really cool shooter that you can play on console with different colors and a different concept. It was a sci-fi shooter, but it felt the shooting was better than any other like military shooter out there on console.
Sure.
Even though some of them were like there were a couple of decent Rainbow Six games on the PlayStation 1. Um, but aside nothing to the likes of this. And the different weapons, the fact that you can only equip 2 weapons at a time, like a bunch of those things in a sci-fi shooter made it such a fun and like different new experience. And then what changed everything in terms of having fun playing a shooter, I never had a LAN party before the first Xbox. Like Xbox made it very easy to have a LAN party.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the 2-3 times that we played um, Halo with the Xbox bricks, and then you have to, you know, bring your TV to your friend's house like you're moving a couch or something. And our moms and dads would just drive us over, and then we would like bring the Xbox, that stupid giant black brick,
Mm-hmm.
plug it to the TV, and then have the cables plugged from one Xbox to another. And you could have straight up 4 controllers connected. I mean, the TVs that we had were, I don't know, 17-inch. Not, I mean, they were small TVs because they were like the ones that you could move, or the bigger ones were not even what we have today. Let's be honest, at the time, if a TV is like 70 centimeters from one corner to another, that's already on the bigger side of TVs. Nowadays, it would be small.
Absolutely.
But and just playing that with your friends like a whole Wednesday afternoon because we didn't have class on Wednesday afternoon, or on a weekend on a Friday to a Saturday, just hammering hours of Halo multiplayer. It was so much fun in a way that I had not experienced playing on consoles like that with friends before. Like you would have in that sense, the Nintendo 64 was the best because you could plug 4 controllers, right?
Yeah.
So I remember that, but we would still have to take turns. Xbox LAN parties was the first time you can have where all the people who are together at the house can play at the same time, like all of your friends
That's
against each other.
that's not
And
really
sometimes we bring a
true.
third Xbox even too. No, I'm saying in my experience,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
I couldn't play. You have 6 friends or 7 friends hanging out. Even with an N64, you have to take turns. You know what I mean?
Well, if you have
Here,
6
no, it's like
friends,
everyone is
sure,
engaged.
sure.
That's what I'm saying. Like
Okay,
if there's
okay.
Could you
6,
do
7
something
people,
similarly with the 64 with Smash or Mario
could.
Yeah,
Kart?
but that's the thing with
um,
Smash Mario Party, you could play up to 4 players
yeah,
on the
you
same
could.
console. You could play
Mhm.
Yeah.
GoldenEye, like you were saying, the
And
consoles.
GoldenEye, yeah,
Like
yeah. You
I had
LAN parties
a
of GoldenEye.
my TV was, I want to
Mhm.
say, 25 inches. It was like it's this fucking small cube, and we used to play like GoldenEye on that shit. I mean, imagine what's 4 small squares people just. But at the
Couldn't see
time,
anything.
it
It
was
was a
the norm.
blast.
It was just like, oh, bro, we can all play
Yeah.
together. It's fucking
Mhm.
fantastic, you know. And I mean, like I'm not an FPS player, but I have such great memories of playing more Perfect Dark than GoldenEye. I was more a Perfect Dark boy than GoldenEye, but just the playing co-op and those things and being able to play with someone next to you and like even if it was a small screen, it was just the norm. It was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And
Fun.
but I do agree with you. For me, in terms of the Xbox, what made the big switch was, I mean, the Dreamcast already had online, and it was a big thing, but it didn't really explore it well. It didn't.
Xbox
And
was
Xbox was the turnaround.
gold,
Yeah, because Xbox
pun
Live at the
intended.
time, yeah, at the time, Xbox Live was really blooming. And I remember the first game I actually really played online like that was Unreal Tournament 2. And I had so
Ah,
much fun playing that shit. And I'm not an FPS gamer, but
right.
playing,
Unreal Tournament 2 is FPS and TPS. I remember you could do both, I believe, because you could use melee weapons as well, and you would see your own character in third person.
well,
Yeah.
not Unreal Tournament 2, it was FPS.
Unreal Tournament 2 for the first Xbox. I
It
think
was
so.
just FPS.
It's another spin-off of Unreal Tournament, I think,
Maybe.
that you could play on
Unreal
third
2?
person.
Unreal 2 or Unreal Tournament
Unreal
2?
Tournament 2. 100%, that's what I had.
Then probably another spin-off. I'm confusing, but yeah, because I had the first one and the third one, but I played Unreal Tournament on PC,
Oh, okay.
which felt like Quake at the time. I mean, PlayStation, the first PlayStation towards the end, also had like that thingamajig. What you call it? There was a thing that you could split to get 8 people to play at the same time.
Yeah, so the PlayStation 2 had like 2 entry
Special part.
It had the
points,
special
and you
thing that you
could
can put in that looks like a.
buy the boomerang thing.
Yeah,
Actually, the first PlayStation also had that,
it
and
did.
it looked
Yeah.
like a boomerang
It
thing
looks like
where
a
you had
boomerang. Yeah,
yeah
100%.
for Mhm.
For online, it was Xbox. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't play much online because my internet was shit. But the few times that I did, I thought it was a lot of fun to play Counter Strike live, and of course Halo 2.
Mm.
Like Halo 2 was still, it was a big deal when it came out. I remember at the time it beat a bunch of records of most units sold in its opening weekend or something. Like
Makes
it was
absolute
10 million
sense.
on the first day. And this is when the Xbox is 3 years in
Mm.
their life cycle,
Yeah.
which is crazy when you think about it that way, you know?
Mhm.
True.
And
True.
towards the end of that first console, I think when the 360 came about was really like the maturing years. And I think Sony was playing catch up at that time when it came to multiplayer,
Multiplayer.
multiplayer,
When it came to multiplayer.
multiplayer, multiplayer,
But
Mhm.
okay, before we move
and
on,
online. Yeah,
Lawrence, did you have the original Xbox or no?
No, I exchanged
played
it
it.
for a certain period of months. My PS2 with an Xbox of
With Pedro Araújo.
exactly.
Right.
What
And
year
at
was
the
that?
time, I only
2004 or
played
5, right?
Morrowind, Fable, and Knights of the Old Republic.
KOTOR, yeah. So
Mhm.
2004,
Oh yeah, it was late-ish.
5.
And it
Yeah.
was what made me decide to buy the 360 instead of the PS3 because
So did you get KOTOR 3?
no, because BioWare had announced Mass Effect.
Ah, sure.
BioWare had they only worked on the first Knights of the Old Republic, and then the second one was a different studio. It was Obsidian. And
Mhm.
during the transition phase, I think they already announced it on the first year of the 360. They were like, "Yep, next game coming up, Mass Effect," and I was like, "Holy shit, this looks amazing! I'm gonna get a 360 right now."
Fair
And
play.
that was it. It was so Fable 2 was also in the horizon. For a moment, I thought Oblivion was going to be exclusive to 360, but it got released to PS3 as well.
Right.
And another big deciding factor was that Square Enix was finally releasing on Xbox. Final Fantasy 13 released on the 360.
Which is terrible.
So for me,
but...
which ended up not being my favorite Final Fantasy. Let's just put it diplomatically.
Sure.
No, yeah, but you didn't know at the time. You were
I
still
didn't know
excited
at the
for it.
time. I was super
Yeah.
excited. For me, all the planets and the stars aligned. I was, yep, 360 it is.
It makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Interesting. And okay, so let's keep going with you then. What year did you get the 360? Do you remember?
I don't. Possibly either 2006, around that time. Maybe. When did the 360 release, actually?
Probably around 2006.
2005,
2005?
I believe. I think I was 2005 or 6. I remember I was 14 years old.
Yeah, because
so it was 2005 or 6.
The Xbox PS2 generation was very short-lived, if I remember correctly.
November
it was
22, 2005.
Yeah, okay.
5, yeah.
Yeah, so
Makes
I
sense.
must have bought the 360 like in spring of 2006 or something.
Nice.
Oh, wow. I think I got mine the year after that when Gears of War 2 came out.
Yeah. I got into the 360 game way later. I got it in 2010. So
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that even though there were a lot of really, like, let's just say that if we look at it objectively, right, the games that came out at the middle of the life cycle of the 360 are a lot more similar to the games that are still around 10 years later than the games that came out in the middle of the life cycle of the original Xbox. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like that generation is the one that really defined the way games would play and look like for a few years to come.
Sure.
I think we lost a lot of variety too. There were really cool games for the original Xbox that I really enjoyed actually. I don't know if they were exclusives or not, but it was a Kingdom Under Fire. I don't know if you remember. It was like a beat 'em all, half like real-time strategy game.
Yeah, I remember it.
It was really good. A very
interesting
underrated
hybrid.
gem that I replayed.
The franchise is still alive, but it's now gone online. And it's
and the 360 version is not as solid as the
no.
original game.
You have on PC. I don't know if it's.
There's a third game that came after that. Yeah, I know what you were talking about. I'm just saying that the version, the sequel to that game, which came out on the 360, was not as good as the first one when I tried it, and that's why, like, for me, it just stayed. Like, for me, that was the best iteration of how to play that game. It's too bad that it didn't keep going the same way. It was very difficult. I never managed to finish it. Then obviously, Dynasty Warriors was a lot of fun. The jet sets and stuff. But
Dynasty Warriors, hell
yeah. Back when they were still good.
Yeah.
You know?
Dynasty Warriors 2 and 3, my mains.
2, 3, 4 is excellent. 5 is still very solid, and after that is just Koei ran out of money.
The first two games on the PS2, it was Final Fantasy X and Dynasty Warriors 2.
Nice.
Yeah, those games were great. But when we moved to the 360, I really feel that
Mhm.
In a way, the consoles and the types of games became more similar to each other. Meaning that a lot of games that released on the 360 also released for Sony.
Sure.
That's when they really started competing for the same market, as
Mhm.
opposed to both developing their
Mhm.
own thing and then having some games in common, like the
Yeah,
sports franchises and the some shooters.
yeah.
But then
Absolutely,
it's
yeah.
like they started competing for the same territory
I think
more
you're
than
right.
actually charting their
Yeah,
own territory as they used to be with
yeah.
consoles, because that's like how most consoles used to operate, and then they start competing
Mm.
for the same field. Yeah.
I think you're right. It was not uncommon before, like for example, uh, 2D platformers, Mario or Sonic iterations, or 3D
Or
platformers, Mario
different games. In
iterations.
this sense, I'm saying like they have the same
But
games, but for
afterwards,
different consoles.
yeah, for example, with Gears of War, the example you gave, every third-person shooter would include the mechanics that made
Over,
Gears of War so popular, the cover
yeah,
shooting. Although, yeah, and
still
whatnot. But yeah,
still has its flaws,
um,
but it's still a wonderful change to video
mhm.
games. I mean, cover third-person shooters were very much mid late 2000s. No, I'm not going to say it was a fad, but it's just that we saw it everywhere at the time because it
Yeah.
changed the way we approach shooter games, and now
Mm,
it's just something we take for granted with a lot of those games. You know, it's the equivalent of a double jump for the side scrollers. You know,
yeah,
but
sure.
for third person shooters, it became just a part of
Hmm.
the game
The
itself.
formula. Hmm.
Yeah, part of the formula. Um,
Hmm.
Do you guys feel that when you had okay, let's talk about hardware for a minute. My first Xbox never had any issues. I never had the problem with the cable that a bunch of people had, the fire hazard. They had to like send the cable
360
back,
was a
reset it.
nightmare. I
360,
burned
I
through
never had
three of
I
those
never had
consoles.
any problems with 360.
I
I
never
had
People
had
told me that
I
half
never
the
the
had a
Ring
games
of
problem with the
Death
junk
360
twice.
either. Never.
Twice I had the Ring of Death with the
twice. You had the
360.
white
Twice.
one, the bigger
With
tower, right? With
two
no
different
HDMI cable.
Xboxes. At least the first one or two, yeah.
Yeah. I only had the white 160 gig tower.
So
That's all I
you
had.
had the
I never
original
needed another one.
360.
Yep.
And then the
Not the
last Xbox
original,
I
because
had
it's the
was
one that they made like a year later. But
It's
yeah,
still the
kind
original.
of.
okay.
No, because you got
It still counts as the
original,
original.
you got elite, and you got slim.
Elite.
That's
That's
pretty
another
Okay,
much
one I
what
it
you
was
had.
the
have.
original one, but it wasn't the launch version one. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? Like I
Yeah.
didn't have the same. Mine wasn't included in that first half of Xboxes that were shipped that they knew that they knew had problems or were going to have problems down the line
Right.
after a couple of years. Mine was the like the after a certain amount of serial numbers they fixed it, and mine had a serial number. I had to check that if you were at risk or not and had to return it, and I didn't have to do that.
Well, that's good.
So it was fine. Only my at one point the Xbox started to complain when I already had the Xbox One.
Okay.
Well, only when it became proper old, you know. But then I could just like it was awesome. I took the disc of that Xbox, and one of our friends lent me one of his other Xbox 360s he wasn't using, and I just put my hard drive block on that one. There you go, problem solved. You don't even have to transfer shit to memory cards or upload to this and that. You just take a drive from one and plug it in another. No problem. I thought that was really practical at the time. Like we went from memory card to no memory card to a giant memory card that is pretty much unlimited if you have 60 gigs. And yeah, I know people are thinking 60 gigs nowadays is not much, but you have to remember at the time we didn't install games. Like the drive was reserved for mostly
Thank God for
just
that.
save data, you know.
Mhm.
So and some people had arcade games in there that you would download, but that came a bit later. That came more in the second half of the
Yeah.
that console's lifespan, not
At
the
the
first
time,
half.
at the
First half was
time, I
still very
had
much
the
just
the
being a disc.
360. Arcades was already a staple, so a lot of the games I had were
Yeah.
arcade games. Like I bought the 360 in 2010, and it was a blessing because The first game I got with it was Afro Samurai, first of all, which was amazing in
Nice.
its own right, like
Nice. That's a
amazing.
very good first game to have.
But I remember that I purchased it. I got it with Afro Samurai, and then I think I finished the game within a day or two. What I did was go to a secondhand shop. I got Assassin's Creed 1 till Revelations because they were all out, and I got them for super cheap.
Out?
And oh my god, the moment I played the first Assassin's Creed, it was like mind fucking
Yeah.
blown. Like,
Yeah.
dude, I could not let go of that game. I played the first and the second and Brotherhood. Within a week, I had finished all the games. Like, I was like, bruh, I burned through those games like insane. I stopped going to uni because of those games. Like, fuck that. I was like, nah.
Oh, so you played the first Assassin's Creed like years after it
Yeah,
came out. Not
absolutely.
no no. Ah, all right, all right.
Because the
I
thing
remember
is,
playing it when it came out, and it was one of our friends, Federico. He was like, he invited me over to his house on a Sunday. He said, "Dude, play this." And I'm like, "What? No, no, no! It's like you're gonna love it. It's history,
yeah,
Templars, conspiracies, and shit. You're gonna love it."
cause
And it's parkour, and I'm like, "Parkour
yeah,
and
cause
history and assassin. What?"
cause that's the
3
thing.
hours went by. I
The,
The
sat down,
team
and his
behind
mom is
Sands of
like,
Time.
"Dinner," and I'm like, "What do you mean dinner? I just sat down." 3 hours went by.
dude,
It
that's
was
the thing. I think that both
yeah.
for me and for a lot of us, like I think for Lawrence as well, like because we are very interested generally in history and things like that, that that game it pushed the boundaries for geeks like us because it was like
Yep.
bringing together.
It's for geeks and the nerds.
Yeah, it was for geeks. Exactly. No, it's just because we loved the gameplay because the gameplay was
Yeah.
unique and revolutionary at the time. It was like if you take Prince of Persia to some
The
degree,
climbing, but
you
it
know,
is because
it's
the team of Sands of Time is the same team that's behind the same Assassin's Creed game. I still
well, there you
remember the
go.
Ubisoft presentation, like in 2005 or 2004. Them presenting Assassin's Creed for the first time and being blown away by the climbing mechanics, right? Because before,
Yeah.
every platformer, you could clearly see where the ledge is, and if you went a little bit to one side or the other, you would just fall.
Yeah.
It was on rails, but flavor-wise, you were climbing. This was the first time that
You could really
climbing felt real to some extent, right? Because you could see the animation of the character putting the hand into the fissures and the ledges and
Oh, by the way, just for context,
different
during this
materials.
period this game came out, our friend
Mhm.
here was an avid boulder rock climber.
Yeah,
So I'm sure he must
climber.
have,
Yeah,
felt great
yeah.
during that time
True that.
to play
It
a
was.
game like that. Yeah.
Mm.
What I really liked about the 360, and this was true for games like Skyrim, for example, like Assassin's Creed, for example, is
All
that
right,
third-party
Skyrim
games,
was.
generally speaking, third-party games ran better on the 360 than they ran on the PS3.
They did.
Um,
That's very true.
and that was really cool. Bayonetta, for example, there were a lot of games, Vanquish, a lot of games were
Bayonetta.
almost unplayable on the PS3, but or would
Mhm.
crash often, or people had issues, but would just be amazing and have
I
no
don't know.
problem on the
I
360.
never owned
Yeah.
the PS3.
Mm.
But yeah,
I know people who own Skyrim for PS3, and I've heard
Yeah,
some horror stories.
problematic.
I've always
Okay.
heard
Yeah,
very badly
yeah.
of the
Oh,
PS3
but
iteration.
Skyrim was buggy from release date, huh? Like you
No, but
had
I mean, like
even yeah.
game breaking shit all the
Even on the
time, and like
Xbox before the
rendering.
hundreds of patches, you would
Hmm.
have a very astonishing bug where the dragons were flying backwards.
I didn't have that. You know why? Because on the Xbox 360, I only played the very vanilla version of Skyrim because I didn't plug
Oh,
my Xbox to the internet at the
okay.
time. It was unplugged. I wasn't playing
Hmm.
online,
Hmm.
so I just played the CD version, and it was amazing.
Okay.
Like that was a
Mhm.
game that I didn't play Elder Scrolls much. I played Oblivion a little bit, but I thought it was too clunky and it looked weird and it was a bit boring, to be honest. Like the action parts of the game to me were too sporadic and it took so long to do everything. But that was a
Mm.
different time in my life. That was a time where I had, limited screen time. When I was living alone
It's
and I had a
okay. You don't
full
have to
weekend to
explain
myself,
yourself. You can make
you
your
know,
judgments.
I finally, when I got Skyrim, for me, Skyrim was a huge step up, and I could play it. And it's the
Bah.
first RPG that
Bah.
I seriously fell in love with on console.
It did streamline a lot of the said clunkiness from the previous Elder Scrolls, but it also lost a lot of what's the word I'm trying to pronounce?
Intricacies.
Thank you.
Good man.
Yes.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
was not a Skyrim fan. I'm still not a Skyrim fan, so I'm not gonna say anything.
It's
Right.
fine.
Sure, but but what I mean in this case is that it didn't. It was actually you who convinced me to play it, you and Frankie, because we were at his place and you were both talking about the game, and I was like, this game doesn't look very good, guys. You have to remember for the 360, Skyrim came out in 2011, right? So at this point,
Yeah.
it
Visually
should have
speaking,
looked better.
já
It
estava
should have
ultrapassado.
looked
Yeah.
better. Yeah, it was already a bit dated. For
Mhm.
PC, no. For PC, I thought it was fine, even though other games looked better. PC was fine, but for the
Mhm.
360, it was a bit. The
Mhm.
PS3 was very low frame rates. It was worse than watching an old movie.
Mhm.
But for the 360, I still thought it was kind of ugly. But then I actually just started playing it and gave it a go
It was
on your
all about
recommendation, and also,
ambience and
dude, and
setting.
that was exactly the
The
setting, the atmosphere, right?
music, the
So
effects of the
that's a
landscape.
very good Xbox
Whatever,
memory for me.
guy.
I mean,
Whatever.
in my opinion, um, it's arguably that one and Mass Effect were the games that I enjoyed the most, and were on the 360. You
Mm.
know, it wasn't PC. It wasn't on. I mean, I never owned a PlayStation after that, but I really felt like I did the good choice having a 360 as opposed to a PlayStation 3 for that generation. You know, it
That's
wasn't
fair.
because of one game alone. It's just like because of a series of games. The games would also drop down in price pretty quick after release.
Mm.
Like 2 years later, it was a time where we got flooded with so many
Yeah, that's
different games,
for sure.
but the genres kind of got a bit more narrowed. Like the types of games that you could play got a bit more narrowed. But within those, you know, within those genres, we got a lot more games after that.
Yeah, I think
Um,
the 360 is when I had the widest library of games you can
games, yeah.
So,
participate.
but guys, at the times you had the 360, were you still conditioned by time frames, as in like you could only play for a certain amount of time when you played?
No,
For 4 years, for
you
me,
go first.
yes. Only when I moved out of my parents' house was that different.
Fair.
I did a
Definitely.
little bit, but at the time I also had other things that I enjoyed more, and I was a little bit more I mean, I took care of myself better at that time. When I got the 360, I was, I think, 16, 17, 18. So there were other distractions, including being out of the house, or partying and stuff like that, like
Yeah,
hanging
yeah,
out
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
outdoors in the street. Even though you're freezing your balls, you're better off than being at home,
Mm.
type of thing,
I
like
never
spending
had
more
that
time with
issue,
friends.
but that's fair enough.
Mm.
Yeah, but no, also because if I was home, if you're home, you're expected to either be studying or doing something else. So I played Xbox at home when I was still living with my parents, mostly when I had nothing to do outdoors or outside, or I would play it like late in the evening, like from 9 until 11 until bedtime, which is not a time where you're going to do your homework anyway. So it was more around. I had more screen time when I had a 360 than the PlayStation or the first Xbox. That's for sure. But I was also better at managing my time, and I wasn't. I think my parents weren't too worried about me gaming too much at that time anymore. The concerns shifted to other
Okay,
coming home
on a
late and
side
that
note,
type of thing.
can I ask you, can you ask you both you boys
Yeah.
on a side note, because unlike you boys, I never had restrictions on my gaming schedules. I was
Sure.
always allowed to do whatever I wanted because I did academically what I had to do, and my parents were like, well,
Mhm.
the kid's doing whatever he needs to do, so who gives a shit? So,
Mhm.
how was it being confined within time frames gaming growing up? That sounds for me like it's a really weird
Lolo,
thing
you
to
go
juggle
first.
with.
Uh, I guess that would push me to accomplish as much as I could within the time frame I had. Like on weekdays, I could only play for 1 hour
Jesus
before
fucking
dinner.
Christ. Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Ew.
Okay.
And then on weekends, it was a little bit more relaxed, depending on how much work I still had needed to do.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, during that time, I guess it always pushed me to try. I played games like in an effective way. I developed like an effective gamer mentality, and only after I moved out, when I could like play as much as I wanted, did I started to get trying to immerse myself into the games I had. For example, Skyrim, I think, was one of the first games where I could actually 100% lose myself and just immerse myself in the fantasy of role playing whatever I was role playing as.
Yeah, I remember us in London and you like, so this is my character, this is his background story, this is what I'm doing now. I remember. I remember very vividly.
Yeah,
So,
Fallout 4 and all those games, and yeah, but
okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
For me, it's a bit similar to Lolo's story, but the restraints were a bit different. Home, it was like, let's make sure that when we're not, from the parents' point of view, let's make sure when we're not home that he's not spending too much time on screens. But if they were home and it's like, like your dad or stepdad is watching the news and it's already after dinner, it's 9 p.m. and you go to bed at 11 and you're like, okay, just go up. But aside from that, it was always a tool to get me to behave, otherwise we'll take the cables or no, you can,
Okay,
um, it can't ground you. But what did happen was that it really made me go a lot more into reading, for example,
fair.
spending time on the internet, spending time online, but mostly reading a lot, comic books, a lot of regular books too, novels, and that's the cool thing about it is that it was very difficult to get video games. I didn't have a big library growing up of video games. It was rather short. I had to pick them really carefully, and I would trade them constantly. So I never had like more than 8, 10, 15 games at a time on my shelf. They kept I had a few that would stay there that I wouldn't trade, but then the other half I would be constantly trading those games
Right.
until I moved out. And when I moved out and I could manage my own schedule and you don't have to spend like let's say family time or things like that because you can manage it your own by yourself. I was still doing well at uni. So I didn't have that issue and I could pace myself.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was that that's when I really the immersion started in gaming. Before that, all we had, and back me up on this, guys, for immersion was shitty weather 1 week holidays, the November holidays and the February 1 week holidays. If you managed to actually stay home and you couldn't do much, that's when that's when I played Ninja Gaiden hours and hours, or Dynasty Warriors hours and hours and hours and hours. Otherwise, Wednesday was the gaming day because you have the afternoon off um, as I'm like early teen or mid teens. But later on, no, it was when I moved out of the house that I really, if I had a weekend to myself and I had Mass Effect or Skyrim, I'm going to play Skyrim all weekend. I'll go out to get groceries, do laundry, work out. Apart from that, Skyrim.
Fair
Uh,
play. Fair play.
yeah.
No, it's just it's weird for me to think about that because again, I've always been super free in my gaming schedule and I probably am the oldest gamer between all of us, our group friend that actually gamed a lot growing up. Because
Yeah.
since I was 3, I've literally had hundreds of games for the NES, the SNES. So you guys came into the gaming, scene a little bit later than I have
Later,
to that
sure,
degree.
definitely.
And for me, it's always
Lots of
weird
us, yeah.
because for me, the only condition for me gaming was literally you do well in school, you can do whatever the fuck you want. That's it. And I always did very well in school. So I was like, okay. Also,
For that time, how come you didn't have a PlayStation as well? How come you always had Nintendos, right?
Nintendo's my
And I think you
boys.
spend more. Yeah, I think you spent a lot more time with the arcade games and stuff than you did with like AAA releases, and you played different games, I think,
I
on the
mean,
360
the thing
especially.
is, I played a
Uh,
lot of AAA games on Nintendo, like because Nintendo was pretty much what you play is Nintendo games. So all of them are AAA games at the end of the day, because that's what you play. You play the NES and the SNES. You're playing the Mario's. You're playing later on in the 64 the Banjos and Kazooies. You're playing the exclusives of the consoles, and really all the games come out as AAA games. There aren't really indie games back then, So all the games I played were AAA back in the day. Um, but then the thing is, because I grew up with games that were within, that genre, that were AAA games, but retro AAA games, as I've developed my taste in games for, recent games, I tend to circumnavigate towards indie because it is more related to the games I played as a child or to the games I played growing up. They're games that have inherently more of that substance to them. AAA games nowadays, for me, feel very superficial and don't really feel as. It's not that they don't feel as worked on, but they don't feel. They just don't have the same connection for me. Like, I'll play.
But
Tell me.
is it that, or have we just grown up and to some extent
I don't.
just
I don't think it's because we've
don't
just
get
grown up.
as easily impacted about things that we would have
I don't think
before?
so
Because
because it's what I told you,
okay,
Lawrence. Like when I got like the 360 and I played Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed was a AAA game that was completely new and different at the time. I still fell
mm-hmm.
in love with it and I was like completely stricken back. I was like,
Yeah,
fuck. And there's still
yeah,
games nowadays that I play that might be
that do that.
AAA that do that, but
Mm-hmm.
I inherently feel like they don't have the
But not
same.
anymore in a general sense. It's
Not
just
in a general sense. Like when
luck
I
of the draw.
when I
Okay.
play AAA games nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
it's rare that there's one that I really say, my God, I can't stop playing this game. Like this game really is
Mm.
capturing me. Of course, that growing up and
Monster
even
Hunter Rise this year.
yeah, but Monster Hunter Rise is more of a grind and more of a guilty pleasure addiction.
Yeah,
I would never
but
say,
you were very scotched to the.
Lawrence, I got Captain Tsubasa. I was telling Afonso yesterday.
Uh,
I got Captain Tsubasa, which is the arcade soccer game based on the
I
anime.
know.
I got that 2 days ago and I haven't stopped playing. I've played more than 10 hours in like 2 or 3
Wow.
days. So
Okay.
I'm still super involved with it and being like, oh my God, it's fucking great and shit. But it's a fucking it's a stupid
I
crappy
think that
game.
that generation of consoles, the 360, is the one where we slowly started to like steer away from those types of titles, and we really saw, yeah, like I said before, the both Sony and Xbox competing for the same
Sometimes you would have
games in
like
the same
incredible
territory.
titles like Rockstars alone, for example, with Red Dead
Red Dead
Redemption
Redemption
and
was one of those as
yeah,
well that
GTA
was
5,
amazing. Was amazing for me.
right?
Like I
Uh,
fell in love with Red Dead as well. Well, Red Dead Redemption 2 was different. It didn't have the same
That
impact
one
as
was on
Red Dead 1.
Xbox only, right?
No, it got released for the
Uh,
3 as well.
oh no, I'm thinking of what's the Red
Red
Dead
Dead
Revolver,
Revolver, that's for the first Xbox.
that's for
the
Xbox.
first
Yeah.
Xbox.
Uh,
Yeah, okay, yeah,
which I never
all right.
played. I
But
never
then,
played Red Dead Revolver, so.
okay, then after that, it was the big disappointment around the launch period when we
You mean
moved away from
Xbox
the
One?
360. Yeah,
Yeah.
when we moved to Xbox One. Okay, so Lolo when did you get the Xbox One? On launch year? I got it like shortly after. Within like 8
When
months
was
of
the
being
launch year
released,
for
that's when
Xbox
I got
One?
it.
2013, 2012.
2013.
Oh, I
Holiday
got it
period.
much
Late
later.
2013.
I got it
Late 2013.
2015, I think.
Okay. I got it in 2014. And I remember being stuck with Titanfall for a while. Like there was Titanfall and Black Flag, but those were on PS4
Oh,
and on
was it
Xbox as
2014? I
well.
don't remember anymore.
And the problem that I had mostly with Xbox One at the time that it came out is that it didn't feature backwards compatibility.
It didn't.
And no, the 360 did from the jump, which was great because like I still play the other games on that one. But then the Xbox One didn't have
Was
backwards
it something with
compatibility.
the disc reader? Because the disc reader between first Xbox and 360 were still DVD, but the PlayStation
Yeah,
3 was already Blu-ray.
Blu-ray.
Between
the
PlayStation
360
3
was
and PlayStation
technically
4,
Blu-ray, yeah. Storage wise, yeah, excuse me. They were that type of
so the
that
Xbox
type
One
of
was
disc.
the first Xbox to have Blu-ray, and therefore
Yeah.
It was the first
made
one
it.
to have Blu-ray, but you still had to
Yeah.
download an app to read Blu-ray
Yeah.
DVDs. So it
But it was
really,
already yeah.
Oh yeah.
But it was already a different type of
Mhm.
like medium that it would read it on.
Mhm.
And it was a bit of a pity because
Yeah.
they really tried to push the Connect on you when
Mhm.
the Xbox One came out. It
Yeah,
came
that's great
included
to
with a
say.
Connect,
Yeah, we
you
totally
know.
forgot about
Yeah,
that.
and it's a good thing. I think that the iToy was really cool for the PlayStation 2 and 3 at the time. I thought that they were like cool gimmicks. The Wii was in a different space during this period. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
Nintendo was in a different space with the Wii,
the
which
Wii
Wii Sports,
sold
I
so well
argue,
just
is one of
because of
the
that.
Wii
greatest
Sports
games
is great. Wii
of all
Sports is
time. It's one of
amazing.
the best games of all time, like,
Mhm.
and experiences in general.
Mhm.
And when the Xbox One came out and they were trying to force the Connect on you and all that stuff, it was a little bit. And the launch titles were very poor. They were not very good. They
Xbox
were a
One.
little bit anemic. Yeah, for the Xbox One.
I
And I
like
remember
that.
getting it, and I was like, it was either like that or the PS4. And like, which one do I fuck? And I went for the one because I thought that maybe games will also run better on the Xbox as they did comparatively because they run better on 360 than they did on PS3. And of course, they ran the same. Um, and then the exclusives were better for PS4. And I think there was a period for the Xbox One where it was between launch period until Game Pass showed up, where I think that it wasn't really worth it to have an Xbox One because the exclusives were also not fantastic. They were still great titles, don't get me wrong, but were they really worth it to get this console just for that? Was it really worth it just to get Gears? Gears was on its way down already.
Not the
Halo
exclusives,
5
but the
was not
service, right? Xbox Live
phenomenal.
was still
Um,
unmatched
yeah,
in
it was
comparison with the competitors, with the prices and
absolutely. Yeah. And of course, the
availability.
servers of PlayStation had that,
Mm,
that problem with the PS4. And
mm,
I'll argue that I like the home menu and everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Xbox
Yeah, the
One was a
UI is
great
the best
console.
UI you have.
It's the best UI as well. It's a great
mhm,
console, but the problem is, okay, it's a great console. Where are the great games now?
mhm,
And the great games for that generation were on PS4.
mhm,
And until Game Pass showed up and you had like a very cheap Xbox Series S,
mhm.
um, that was a bit
Yeah,
smaller, was more quiet,
yeah.
very reliable console. I still have my 1S here that almost died a couple of times, but it has been behaving very
Mhm,
well lately.
mhm,
I think it's too bad that for a console generation that lasted that long, the
mhm,
first 4 years, five
mhm,
years were not that
mhm.
great, at least for Microsoft.
I gotta say,
And that's where, like,
I
I think
find it really
PlayStation really
funny
took off.
because you
But there were
guys
good.
you guys both
Yeah.
got the one very
Mhm,
early in its release. I literally got
mhm,
the one less than 2 years ago. So for
mhm.
me, I've already got it the best side of it, which is the
You
same
got
thing
the
for the
best side of it.
360.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah,
I got it late on in
I
the
think so.
game, and honestly, I had the Switch first, which was great, and then I got the one for free. So I was like, fuck yeah. And once I got it,
Yeah.
I was like,
Mhm.
bro,
Well,
this is what was missing from my life. Like
That's when I
seriously.
jumped, actually.
yeah. It's true that
Uh,
during that time there were a few things that were frustrating, and I think that you can attest to this, Solo, which was the whole thing of the updates, the thing where you have to install a game in order to play it, which for the longest time was the thing about why would you get a computer? You gotta install it, and no. I never thought that was a problem because I always kept playing computer games, but it was a symptom of how weak the Xbox was. Is
mhm.
that I always played games on computer, but mostly like strategy games and shooters, games that don't run as well on consoles, right? And the
Mhm.
360 was the period where I played the least PC games. And when the Xbox One showed up, that's when I went back to PC gaming for the first 3 years. And that was a symptom of how like the
Similar to
Xbox
you,
One was not
but
that
I went
strong.
on to
Yeah,
another platform.
you went to the
Because for me,
Switch.
the AAA experiences for the Xbox One was Dying Light first, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which for me was very interesting because it was like a Mirror's Edge zombie.
Mirror's Edge and
um,
Dead Island Baby. Yeah.
Fallout 4, that has its issues,
4
of
came
course.
already, but it came already a bit
Mhm.
later, Fallout 4.
Yeah,
Like, think about the
2015.
first 3 years.
Mhm.
Yeah, think late 2015. Think about
Witcher 3,
Witcher 3 came in
Witcher 3.
2015 as well, didn't it?
2015.
No, 15 May.
15, yeah.
Yeah,
Metal Gear Solid 5,
Oh
and
yeah,
Final
Phantom
a bit
Pain.
later as well. Yeah,
Final Fantasy 15. And
15.
the things about these 5 games is that Metal Gear Solid 5 was rushed, and so the story was not entirely finished. Final
Mhm.
Fantasy 15 was in production for 10 years,
Yeah, I
and it
know.
was still rushed at the end. They somehow managed to botch that. Fallout 4 was unpolished. Bethesda was starting to show its cracks.
Yeah.
That it couldn't keep up with the times. And so on and so on. And so for me, like the triple gaming experience at the time was like, okay, so there's no
And
reason
those
to
were all
keep
games.
sustaining AAA because they don't
Not just that, for
come
you,
through.
those are all games that also were
Yeah.
available on PlayStation.
Yeah.
Did you get
Also,
any
yeah, sure.
exclusives for the Xbox
No,
at the
that I can
time?
remember. Oh, Ori. Ori was the
Ori
one
is
exclusive I had.
amazing. Ori is
But aside from
amazing,
that,
bro.
But
yeah.
aside
Same for
from
me.
that,
Aside from
yeah.
Halo,
hmm
nothing else at the time. Destiny was also available for PS4 and ran just the same.
hmm
Dying Light, The
hmm
Witcher.
hmm
I didn't see a big
Yeah,
like a big
2017,
point.
I jumped to the Switch.
Yeah. The only thing that made me still feel okay about my Xbox is that I knew people with a PS4 who had problems with it, like being
hmm
super loud and overheating and stuff. But still, the games were so much better.
Mm.
Um, and I think that it was only towards the last, 3 years, I think that Xbox with Game Pass and with a console doesn't have as many problems really has started to, be better. I'm not saying better than the PS4, but better or worth it for the people who bought one. I think if you bought an Xbox One S in 2017, that's a really good time, or 2018, I think that's a really good time.
Mm.
That was the best time to get one, in my opinion, when they went into backwards compatibility and everything. But it's a little bit, it's a shame because it's not a bad machine. It's just that they failed to give the audience anything besides. I mean, their big shtick was the Connect, and it crashed. So what else do you have to offer if you don't have amazing exclusives? Because that's the time where their exclusives also started to dip. That's the
The
problem.
online service
Um,
was the answer,
yeah,
right? The pricing, the
yeah,
sales.
yeah. I think the online services were good. It was still better to play on Xbox One online compared to
hmm
PS4, or easier. or
Mhm.
less or more reliable at least. But it
Mhm.
wasn't as big of a difference as it was back with the 360 and the PS3. You know,
Mhm.
360 and PS3. I remember people telling me it was awful. I heard a story the other day on a podcast. Someone saying, some British guy. He was saying that he would have like play with his friends on a PlayStation, but have the chat party with the Xbox because the PlayStation service wasn't just very reliable. So that was funny, you know. But
Mm.
it's too bad that those first 4 years for the Xbox One didn't do much. I remember a time where I was using it mostly for
Mm.
Netflix, and
Isn't it
using my
happening
computer just to play
again
the
now
rest.
with the new generation of consoles where there's not?
Yeah, but I think that goes both ways. But fortunately, in this case, it's a bit different because now Microsoft has something to offer, which is
Mm.
the legacy huge library, backwards compatibility plus Game Pass. So
Mm.
this is a good thing that you can argue for competition, right? It's a
Mm.
very competitive argument.
Mm.
But 5 years ago,
Mm.
what are you going to do? I mean, no wonder that they couldn't sell much when so many amazing exclusives
Mhm.
like came out for the on the Sony platform. And it's a shame that that Xbox couldn't pull that off, you know. I mean, they had the technical ability to do so, but they just didn't.
Mm.
And that was a bit of a shame. I still really enjoy the fact that with the Xbox Live Gold, you get free games and all of
Mm.
those things, but I didn't notice much of a difference playing offline or online besides Titanfall and Destiny and
Mhm.
Dying Light as well. And those were games that in the first place you could have on PlayStation as well
Mm.
at a time where it didn't matter so much. So that's a shame. But I think that nowadays with the new gen, um, it's funny to think that because the Microsoft platform is obviously PC because of Windows, platform, right? But the Microsoft console is still the Xbox. Microsoft has literally two different platforms, one of them being the software, Windows, and the other one being hardware, the Xbox, where people can play games on. And it's funny that nowadays, obviously, the new Xboxes and the way they're wired and made work a lot more like a PC does than a console. But that's because just consoles just kept evolving in general. And I think that the state where it is now is a lot more competitive than the state where it was 7 years ago. You know, um, because now it's actually a good bargain, I think, to get a Series S and Game Pass. I mean, it's the most affordable way to get current gen gaming. At least they have an edge on that. Again,
Mm.
um, and but I still don't see the exclusives
Mhm.
coming in. Maybe with this new Bethesda deal, but the problem is that they have all these deals with these studios that people are starting to get a bit tired of with their cash grabs and stuff. I'm
Mhm.
going to mention also the way Halo Infinite plays, the multiplayer and all that stuff, where again, big manufacturers are not trying to pave their own way, but instead they're competing for the same path. They're competing for the same market of the free to plays, about the grinding games, and I don't mind that Halo Infinite has a beta or like a Halo Infinite Lite. You know what I mean? Which is the case with the Halo Infinite that I'm playing. But it's a shame that it's not gonna feel like you actually bought a game to get the experience to play. It was two steps back with Halo, and that
Okay.
worries me a little bit because just because for the fans who've been there for 20 years, you're not providing a better experience. You're providing a lesser version of something that people are already used to when we
Mm.
expected a step forward.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about the fact you can't choose your playlists. You got to grind the way the game is set up with the experience points, blah, 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 blah. I mean, we can have that criticism of Halo Infinite, but it's too bad that maybe in 2 years it's going to be okay on season 3 or 4 or whatever season of Halo Infinite to get in. But for the current time being, where exclusives are still important, Xbox like gave with one hand and took with the other,
I
right?
think it's
So
because
for
of
the
the
Xbox
times we're in.
players,
It's trying to replicate
absolutely,
the
yeah,
business
yeah,
model from
absolutely.
other online
Because
shooters,
now
right?
if Halo Infinite is free to play, even if you don't have Game Pass, which I think is the case, you don't need Game Pass to play Halo Infinite. You need Xbox Live Gold, and that's it. It's a lot more accessible to a lot more people, but for the niche audience and the people who really like the experience to play Halo and to, you know, quote unquote fuck around. I mean, I love that on Halo 3 you could make your own levels, right? Halo 5 you don't have that anymore. They're taking certain things back that made Halo a different and more exclusive experience to the Xbox platform. You know what I mean? Back to the LAN parties and the like all the different maps. The reason why we would have those LAN parties is because this game is freaking amazing. It's not because we can do a LAN party. With the other consoles before, we could do LAN parties too, but there was never it wasn't that much worth it. But with this game, this changes everything. You know, we can, and I don't see the same. Yeah, back to getting older and stuff. The excitement is different. But even when we could play online, we still had LAN parties because this game was very much wired for that. And 20 years into Halo, 20 years into Xbox, it's more open to a wider audience. You don't have to take as much of a risk of buying a very expensive console and $60 on top of that, plus controllers. Here, you can just get a Series S and you're good to go. You know, and it's very small and practical, plays a bunch of stuff. I'm not saying it's not a commercial for the Series S, just saying that it's really cool that it exists as an option if you don't want to go for the actual machine, the tower, or a PS5. And I think that's for the company and for the platform. I think that's going to draw a lot of people. You know, especially if you're like, hey, I need an Xbox. I need daddy. Daddy, I need. I need. No, you want, son. No, I need, daddy. Um, No, you want a Series X, but what you really need is a Series S, and the Series S is very cheap. It's the price of a Switch, pretty much, right? It can compete with the Switch. So for the kids out there, I mean, who are very lucky still today with a gazillion free-to-play games, you still, if you want to get into the console world, with Game Pass, I mean, I wouldn't. I wish I had Game Pass when I was 15 years old, so I didn't have to like keep trading games. If I know that every month I put $10 into this, and I can play all of these games, I'm good. Especially because your friends are going to be doing the same thing, so you end up also playing multiplayer for the games on that service. Yeah.
If your friends
What
have
do
an
you guys
Xbox
think?
One,
Yeah.
Xbox
Yeah, if your
Series, I
friends have
mean.
an Xbox One. Yeah, Xbox Series. But I mean, assuming they did the same way we had the 360, um, what do you guys think of like not predictions but feeling of where it's gonna go for the next 5 years, like for the Xbox?
For the
Uh,
Xbox.
Yeah, in the direction things are going.
Look, for me, particularly, if we think about the way the latest gaming generations have lasted, considering the 360 and the One, same as the PS3 and the 4, like generations have become increasingly longer in time span. So, from my perspective, the Series S is the same as or Series X is the same as the PS5. They should be a like a long lasting generation. So whatever new things come up, whatever new tendencies, whatever new, software, hardware comes up, is just going to be included towards what we have now. I mean, you look at the PS5 runs at 120 FPS and is 8K compatible. I mean, that shit is pretty much the future within the next decade. I mean, that's going to
They're a lot
stay.
closer to PCs in what they can
Dude,
do.
if you look at
The
it,
difference is like
no
it's not
one
this anymore.
no one
It's more like
games no
here,
one
especially
games
for the
on an 8
price.
first no one games on 8K already as a standard. That's not a standard. But the fact that you can do it means that this is gonna last for a long ass fucking time, you know? And my prediction is that whatever this generation is, wherever it's going, it's just gonna last really long. I'm expecting this generation to last longer than the previous ones, and they've
10
already,
years.
I would say 7 to 8, probably,
Mm.
because anything can be upgraded from here to then.
Hopefully.
And that's the way I see it, is whatever comes up next is just going to be reiterations of the same console, because technology only can go so far
As well,
in the
right? Or an
mainstream.
XX.
Yeah, but technology only can go so far in the mainstream, the same way that you've had 4K for 10 years and you're seeing 4K being mainstream now, you know? The same way that 8K will be mainstreamed within the next 10 years and consoles are catching up to it. So if you have next iterations of Xbox, instead of the Series S and the X, you'll have a new one, like, I don't know, Series XS that has 8K, because PS5 already has it. But that's where it's going to some degree. Apart from that, I don't really know what else to expect, because unless you include VR the same way you have the HTC Vive and other things and you upgrade towards that realm, I don't see where else we're going right now, personally. But
Right.
that's that's the way I see it. I don't know. Then again, I am a very old school gamer, so those things don't really appeal to me much. And as they come out, I'm always that person that will buy stuff much later in the lifespan. Like, I never buy things as they come out, I wait. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm gonna wait 2 or 3 years until I might get a new gen console, because I don't see a point in getting things as soon as they come out, because there's bugs, there's issues.
PC.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you want to really keep on top of things, get a PC, get a good PC, and the good PC will last you for a longer generation either way. Even if not at the top of the chain, it will still follow up with everything that's coming
Yeah.
out gaming wise. So, from my perspective, it really is gonna boil down to what improvements are going to be made in the next 2 to 3 years, and then we can judge from then on what is the next step, what can be done further on. But even though you have all these possibilities, and like you were saying, the Series S is an affordable option, and I think that within the new gen realm, it's really the thing that makes the most sense getting. Apart, of course, the PS5, because of exclusives. Personally, Sony is still the same for me as it was 10, 15 years ago. Exclusives are the reason to get a Sony console. I don't personally see other reasons to get one, personally. So it's really going to boil down to what happens within the next 2 to 3 years to see where it's going, how it's developed. And before then, I can't really say. It's really hard to like pinpoint the evolution of it, because if you look back at the evolution of consoles, even from the first generation till now, we're what, the 10th generation now, 11th, I think. I'm not 100%
Something
sure.
like that.
And the initial generations up until the 6 or 7 generations were very short lived, and the last generations have been long lived. So it's really hard to say. The same goes for, any other realms, be it science, be it medicine, be it anything. Things slow down because they will have a longer lifespan to what they are directed to. So it's hard to say what the next things are going to be. I think that if there is a bet within the next years for consoles, it's going to be a bigger bet on VR, because VR is still something that is in its infancy, and I think that is going to grow, because it's already been growing slowly, as it has been with other things, again, like 4K, 8K. They grow slowly, but they grow, steadily, which I think is probably where consoles are headed as well, to some degree. But apart
You're
from that,
saying
I
that
don't know.
unless PlayStation and Xbox come develop their own VR, which is actually good or great, there isn't going to be anything that different or that exciting
The thing
coming
is,
within the
I
next
don't
three
think
years.
within the next 3 years, no. But
Sorry, guys,
I
I'm
don't
gonna
know.
have to go.
That's fine. We're
Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine, man.
we're closing
No
up soon
worries.
anyway, right? I mean, we've been
Yeah,
doing it for an hour
I
and a
think
half.
We
yeah,
are.
Yeah.
yeah, we're closing up. I think we can close up now. Actually, that's a good
So
answer.
if you just want to give
Uh,
your opinion as
your
well on
2
this,
cents.
Lawrence.
Cycles. PS3 dropped the ball. 360 did it well. Therefore, Xbox One dropped the ball. PS4 did it better. Maybe maybe we'll see something similar. I don't know. Right now, the only thing that catches my attention is the gimmick of the PS5 controller, right?
Sure.
And the fact that they load games super fast and the performance.
That's new gen for you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say about the matter. I'm not very well informed about the new generation at the moment. I'm still nest up in my Switch.
Fair.
I think that's good enough. All right, let's call it. This was
call
fun.
it. This was good.
More coming soon.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been Papu91, Dagan Keldrum, Jack Reinhardt doing a podcast about the 20 years of Xbox and other shit, as per usual. So, thank you very much for watching. Boys, say whatever you want to say.
Whatever you want to say.
Sounds good. Anyway. Something dark side. Yes, absolutely. That's where we're going. Anyway, lots of love to you all. Catch you in the next episode. See you soon. Bye. Okay,
I really need to go now.
Okay, go do your thing, Lawrence. I know it's 4:30.
I'm gonna be late to the thing, but yeah, was awesome. See you guys. Yeah, ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Yeah, he said this thing goes close to 4:30. Son 4:30.
Pois é, sorry, that's it.
Good conversation.
I could have kept talking for ages. What's up with you, bro? Yeah, I know. I saw you already started smoking up.
Not up.